Hey, everybody.
Hi, Donna.
Hey,
Once again, David. It's nice to have you as
oh,
always.
my pleasure. Good to be with you guys.
We still got a bunch of people joining us. Don't
Okay.
want them to miss all this great information. So we'll let them come in.
And Donna, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm not sure you were on the call at that moment. As we're having this conversation, if there is something that's really specific, an important point of emphasis for your grantees, please feel free to speak up, and we can kind of talk through it together. I think hearing from both of us will be good, but I want to make sure that everybody understands your voice in the program's office. That's the most important voice in this, so we can put this in the 2CFR in context of the important work y'all are doing.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
awesome. Okay, it looks like we got pretty much everyone in. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We're so happy to have with us today David Downey. He is going to go through all of the, well, not all, but like a lot of the important revisions that were made to the 2 CFR Part 200. And so welcome, and I will turn it over to David. Thank you for joining us, David.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks everybody for making time out of their schedules today to learn a little bit more about administering your ed grants under a newly revised 2 CFR Part 200, better known as the Uniform Guidance. So between now and 3:30 today, we're going to be talking about identifying key resources to help you, whoops, hit a button too quick. Identify key resources to help you better administer your ed grants throughout the process. We're going to highlight, of course, those key revisions to 2 CFR Part 200 and what those are going to mean to your grant projects, your staff, the beneficiaries served, and all of that. We're going to discuss how to help ensure successful project outcomes continue. And we want this to be a conversation. We want this to have a real dialogue. So we're going to be monitoring the chat. We're wanting to make sure that you're fully engaged. But we're going to take your questions throughout today's conversation. So feel free to type those in as we go. We've got a lot of good people here who can help answer your questions from the program perspective. And in the context, we want to shape and look at these regulations and these requirements in the context of your particular specific grant program. And we'll kind of we'll talk throughout today's program about what that means and what that's going to look like for all of you who've joined us. Let me get a sense, if I can. Um, how many of you, and you can put this in the chat, I'm going to pop the chat on here real quick on my screen. How many of you would consider yourselves new to administering your federal grants, your ed grant? You can put me or just, yes. If you don't, if you feel pretty comfortable and you're not too new, you can say no, but put that in the chat. Let's just kind of see what folks will say there. I want to see that. Yes, 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 me, new to grants July 1st. Jeremy, welcome. All right, Shannon, and she got Shannon and Nancy said no, but your expertise, Drew says no. We got a few folks who bring in a level of experience and expertise, and we want to certainly encourage you to share your best practices and ideas too. But several folks there would say yes, some folks will say no. We're all learning a little bit, of course, what these new changes to 2 CFR means for us. And not major, excuse me, my nose itches a little, not major changes for us, but they are important for us to look at. So we're going to be, again, talking through the changes as we go. I always like to see who's relatively new here. Looks like Jeremy, I think, was just on the job for a little over a month. So welcome aboard, Jeremy. Now, as we begin this conversation in more detail, I want to emphasize the the partnership that exists between your grant projects and we at the department. We have common goals, but different roles in this process. And that primary common goal is to help ensure that your grant projects are successful. And it's a collaborative relationship. But I also want to be very clear in understanding the responsibilities and expectations that each side has in carrying out this work. Your job, of course, is to implement the grant project based on the approved application, the approved funded application, meeting all the rules and requirements. Our jobs, after we make the help make the tough decisions in terms of how we're going to allocate these taxpayer dollars, is to monitor your grants. So let me say this first. Congratulations to all of you who have received funding in this program, that you have been successful at this point in receiving these grants and getting here now. Now, it's one thing to compete and win these grants. It's another thing, of course, to actually implement them. And the art and science of writing takes a backseat to actually rolling up our sleeves and doing the work. So first and foremost, congratulations. When I use the term grants today, or when I use the term taxpayer dollars or tax dollars, those are synonymous terms. And so I want you to always be thinking about this. You, based on the expertise that you bring to the table, to the quality of your applications, you've been entrusted with your fellow citizens' tax dollars to better meet the needs in your community carrying out these grants. So thank you for what you're doing there. On the other side, I want to also say, as part of our job, the most important piece of our job here at the department is really to monitor your projects. So every and any interaction that we have with you and your data is an opportunity to monitor your projects. And so we're going to be doing that through providing technical assistance, looking at evaluating your risks evolve and change over time, reviewing your reports and the correspondence, getting back with you, and of course, closing out the grants. Now, one of the most important pieces of technical assistance that I think that we can provide you here at the department is the honest, direct answer of no. This is disapproved. This is unallowable. This is denied. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to be telling you no all of the time, but I want you to understand that when we do that, it is in the best interest of the grant program, the taxpayer, and you, the grantee. Especially for those of you who had said that you're newer to this activity, you might have heard the phrase, it's better to go ahead and do something and then ask for forgiveness. And you might do that in your personal life. I would caution that, generally speaking, and I certainly would caution that professionally. And I would really, really caution you not to do that when you're being entrusted with federal funds. It's never just a good idea to go ahead and do whatever and then ask for forgiveness later, because if you're having to do that and it is an unallowable cost, it's something that is out of scope of the grant. It's outside of what the funded approved application is. You'll not only have to repay the funds that you had drawn down and paid out erroneously. In some instances, you might have to pay even more money through interest. So when in doubt, and this is a running theme through today's program, when in doubt, contact your ed program officer, who is listed on box 3 of the GAN. But we're working here together to help make sure that you do the job. So very transparent. You're carrying out the grant. We're monitoring the grant. You're submitting reports. We're reading those reports. And we're making sure that you are on track. If you have questions, you're going to reach out to us. Make sure that the records you keep are valid, accurate, and reliable, and that they are as clear and detailed as you can make them. So go here. Sure, I can. Oh, yeah, there we go. All right. So now the next piece I'd want to highlight, we think about this partnership, are the tools of the trade. Now, these tools we share together. It's a very transparent process. Those of you who wrote in that know that you've got experience, some of you who are brand new to this process, couple of points. Know your program statute inside and out, and the approved application that was funded. Now, those of you who said no, that you do have the experience, I'm going to operate under the assumption that you're with that experience, that you are either part of the organization, might have played a role in writing your grants, and you know the ins and outs of it. If I'm wrong, I want you to read the grant. But certainly, if you are brand new, if you haven't already, read your application, the funded application, cover to cover, and understand what you have proposed to do with these taxpayer dollars. You want to make sure that you're aware of the program statute and the program regs. Now, when we think about the broader administrative regulations, either from the Department of Ed in Title 34 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, we refer to that as EDGAR affectionately, or Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, which effective October 1 is going to be known as the Federal Financial Assistance. You're going to follow these regulations. However, if the program statute or any program specific regulations limit you, those regulations would supersede what's in 2 CFR. So if in 2 CFR, in the cost principles, that's subpart E that we'll walk through, if it says that you can do X, if it's something's allowable in terms of resources, if your program statute would prohibit that, this is a hypothetical. If your program statute says you can't use funds for this purpose, and the uniform guidance would imply that generally you could, the program regulations supersede what is in the statute. Conversely, if the program statute said you could or you must do something, and the uniform guidance said something is generally unallowable, you're going to follow your program statute and the program specific regulations over 2 CFR. So that's this order of precedence with these tools. Now, if there is any concern that there is a discrepancy, you're going to get in writing. You should come back and ask the program office in writing to say whether this is this is an approved course of action or if it's not. And that approval, disapproval is always going to come with a citation that's based on the program statute in such and such place, or in 2 CFR 200-403, this is allowable, whatever it is. We're going to make sure to connect the citations with the decisions, and you put things in writing. I'll also say this: it's much easier to have a telephone call or maybe a Zoom call or whatever when you're seeing the person, you're talking to them in real time. Email is great, but there could be levels of confusion potentially when 2 people are just talking amongst themselves as well. So you have a quick telephone call, you want to follow up and make sure that you've put that information in writing. It's critical that everyone leaves any of these conversations, any of these courses of action that are decided on. You want to make sure that you're all in agreement with what was decided, who does what, if it could take place, if it could not take place, the parameters, all of those things. You want to make sure that that is noted in some type of correspondence that will be uploaded into the official grant file at Ed. You'd want to keep that for your records as well. And generally speaking, citations for justifying those decisions, those are critical as well. Another piece, of course, is the GAN, the grant award notification, and the award terms and conditions, and the approved application. They're all connecting together. Another shared source that we would include would be the department's grant management system, G5 or G5, G6. G6 is the current version that we're looking to update. That's going to be the new name when we make when we upgrade from G5. We're in a bit of a holding pattern. I think I can say that comfortably. So if you see something that says G6 on the face page, but you're still in G5, you're in the right place. You're not in the bad place. You're still where you should be. But we're going to be using that tool. You'll be using it potentially to submit reports, certainly to draw down funds. And we use G5 as not only one of our primary monitoring tools, fiscal monitoring, financial monitoring, but is our preferred system of record. So G5 has evolved from being just a tool to make the grants to being the preferred system of record, our electronic file for our grant projects. I've been with the department since 1994. I can remember when we had large rooms with hard copy paper files, or maybe even volumes of paper files waiting to go out to the Federal Records Center. If you've seen, this is an old movie and I'm dating myself a little bit, but if you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, the end of that Indiana Jones movie, and that large cavernous place, those places do exist, and they are full, not so much exciting things like the Ark of the Covenant, but reports and records of how your tax dollars have been used. In most cases, maybe an ark or two somewhere out there, but your records go to a place similar to that, or they did in the old paper days, I should say. Now, with EDGAR, the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, like 2 CFR, it is available at the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, ecfr.gov, on a day-to-day basis. Part 75 is the piece that you're going to use the most, and part 77 is with definitions. So those two sections are most germane to our grantees. So 75 and 77, formula grants would be 76. Part 97 speaks to human subjects. Every section is important, but day-to-day, part 75 and 77 are there. Going forward, just last week, we issued in the Federal Register, that's the daily newspaper of the federal government, we issued the updates to EDGAR that are going to take place. Most of those take place or are impacting, I should say, the selection criteria and the pre-award activities. So there's a improved set of definitions. There's an improved set of selection criteria that you as applicants will be writing your applications for, that program staff can select to provide to put together stronger, more competitive competitions that will hopefully, I'll knock on wood here, result in even better outcomes for our grantees in terms of meeting their goals and objectives. There will be additional training and guidance to these changes in Part 75 that program staff will be disseminating, as well as our folks in some of the other offices that have overseen the revisions to EDGAR as they take place. But did want to make you aware of this section. But again, EDGAR speaks to all of the Department of Education grants, Part 75 to our direct, discretionary, our competitive grants. That would also include our earmarks that were carved out of the competitive appropriations. So those programs will be with Part 75. In many cases, though, I'll be very honest, from a day-to-day grants administration standpoint, they're going to defer a lot of guidance down to the uniform guidance, namely 2 CFR Part 200. With the GAN, the Grant Award Notifications, we've got a citation there, and we'll see citations throughout today's materials. We'll be sharing these slides so that you can access those at your leisure if you want to go back and refer to them. They are 508 compliant, so if you have colleagues that need a systems reader for visually impaired, it's set to do that. So it's fully compliant. It's in good shape for you in that regard. We see the citation 75.235, and again for the formula side, it's 75.235. The GAN is that official document that outlines the working relationship between your organization and ours. 30 to 40 pages of the fine print, all of the award terms and conditions. I highly recommend that you read this cover to cover as the project director. As the project director, your name will be listed on there. And so you are the department's primary point of contact. And so while we may need to come in and communicate with the authorizing official or the accounting or business office person, you're you as the project director will be the first folks that we talk to. So we want to make sure that we're having that we're all on the same page. While the GAN is the formal official way that we will make you aware of changes, significant changes, award terms and conditions, additional reporting, corrective actions, and the like. Those certainly will be relayed to you through the GAN, but the GAN in those cases, that's not going to be the main way that you're going to get that information. If we make the determination during a budget period to say, wow, Downey nonprofit, we'll use me as an example. If there is a Downey nonprofit that's part of this conversation, that's just by coincidence, using my last name. If Downey nonprofit is struggling in terms of meeting its performance measures, there'll be some conversations, correspondence. If there are concerns with my drawdowns or based on audit reports or something, we say, oh, we've got some unallowable costs. Okay, we're going to take that into consideration. You're going to be hearing about that from us. So even though there might be the formal issuing of a new GAN with additional corrective actions or some kind of plan, it's not going to be grabbing you and surprising you with this. It shouldn't be if you're fully engaged in the conversations. So keep that in mind as we go. But I would invite you to review the GAN fully. Make sure that you're doing that. I'd also want to say this. There are a couple of places here that we'll note where there's some changes. But I want to take this moment, just in case folks can't stay with us for the full 90 minutes. I want to highlight this important piece. The safeguarding, the cybersecurity measures, that you have in place, making sure that those are strong, that they are robust systems, and that you're following your internal controls, ensuring that you're safeguarding access to not only the project records, but accessing your organization's access into G5. So make sure that you're doing everything you can to secure your passwords. You're changing them regularly, that you're not sharing that information with folks. Bad faith actors are out there constantly triggering. They're testing us with bad text messages, faulty email messages. So when you're accessing your own personal your favorite websites, different businesses that you might use, social media, be smart, be secure, be on the lookout for folks that are aiming to misbehave. And I say that only to make sure that we can better safeguard your information and help ensure the integrity of your grant projects, and that there are no vulnerabilities. We've all got vulnerabilities that we've got to work on, but make sure that those vulnerabilities are limited and that you're being just good stewards of these funds. And part of being a good steward, folks, is taking those cybersecurity measures very seriously. We have mandatory training every so many weeks or months on internal controls and cybersecurity. If we don't take those trainings and make sure that we've completed those by the deadlines, we are actually locked out of our system. We've got to go through a whole rigmarole to regain our access so that we can carry out our job. So we're taking that very seriously at the Department of Education. And I want you, as part of this partnership, man, take seriously your own cybersecurity measures at your organization and hold fast to those passwords and your protocols for accessing funds, accessing records and such. Make sure that you've got that information and you're not sharing that widely across the board with others. That's really important to keep that in mind. Now let's look at the overview of 2CFR. Now, one of the changes, a very modest change over the big picture of Title II in the CFR, it's no longer called grants and agreements, but it's the federal financial assistance. And we have the subtitle A. This is the guidance that we're going to be focusing on today. The guidance that OMB provides to federal agencies on government-wide policies and procedures. Subtitle B is kind of the one-stop shopping for federal agencies. And if you go through the table of contents for 2CFR as a whole, our focus today is on Part 2 under the Uniform Guidance, but there are key sections throughout that impact our grantees. Subaward reporting is noted there under one section for Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act. The requirements to have a unique entity identifier or UEI, that's in Part 25. Those sections are there, and so we need to be fully aware of all of this as additional information, maybe new laws that are impacting grants or past regulations that address those will be included in Title II. Subtitle B refers to the federal grant-making agency regs, and many of them are there. You can see ED's formal adoption in 2 CFR 3474. There are a few citations that of note there, including our continued use of the term high risk as a tool to help improve grantee performance. So note that. And every 4 or 5 years, OMB will be looking to update 2 CFR to better address its purposes and be more efficient and clear and aligned with regulatory changes, inflation issues, and the like. And that's what we're seeing here. On April 22nd, OMB issued the final published version of what 2 CFR is going to look like. That date, it went into effect October 1. So for the beginning of the federal government's FY 2025, we're going to be on the uniform guidance. And we'll talk and we'll make sure that as we look for questions and things that we'll tell you what we're doing here. Let's see that last bullet on this slide. Okay. Yeah. So that's something common that we do. And, just so that you're aware of that. The intention is to, and you can, if you did a compare and contrast, the language across the board is more user-friendly. The plainlanguage.gov is a key website that federal agencies are kind of embracing. And you'll see, hopefully, language that's easier to understand, but also makes it clear to understand the expectations so that folks aren't confused with who does what and when. Some of the changes are modest in that scope. For instance, we're using terms and common terminology is another piece. But we might see, and for grantee, you'll see almost throughout this document the term recipient, and then for a subgrantee, a subawardee, as subrecipients. And generally, the requirements for the grantee, the pass-throughs, and the subrecipients, they're going to be the same. So sometimes you might see the word or. We updated that to make sure that people understood it's if you're a grantee, you've got to do this, or a pass-through entity that's making subawards, like state education agencies, you're going to be required to do this. So we've tried to clarify those issues. We're also seeing, and one of the bigger changes here at the federal level is that it's again time to increase the dollar thresholds due to inflation, cost of living, etc. We'll see that a couple of places. Audit requirements have gone up from $750 to $1 million, and the federal definition of what constitutes equipment has increased from $5,000 per unit item to $10,000. Now that's the federal definition. So again, your organizations might have made the decision to follow a lower dollar amount for equipment. That's certainly your prerogative, but if that's the case, then you'll have to treat those lower dollar amounts that you've defined as equipment based on those federal guidelines too. So keep those things in mind. And again, we're always trying to reduce burden, believe it or not, at least on the grantee community, the applicants and the grantees themselves. Not always is it going to be felt at the federal level or state level for that, but we are looking for burden reduction. We're also wanting, again, with the plain language efforts, to make these regulations easier to understand, easier to follow as we go. We've got 26 grant-making agencies who are carrying out their work of thousands of programs, and we're all trying to work, to do this in a manner that is easiest to measure success, account for dollars, and speak to you in the grantee community. Here's some key sections of Part 25. I'd kind of mentioned the universal identifier about the UEIs in 25, the subaward reporting in 170. One of the newer pieces is the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA, which is, it impacts about 40 of our programs across the department, requires grantees that are carrying out, that are allowed to do construction projects, and for our purposes, physical buildings as well as a broadband infrastructure would meet the definition of construction, that we're trying to make sure that those materials, those resources are domestically procured. So you're not only helping to make our nation more self-reliant on our own materials that we'd have available, but we're also trying to boost up and support the manufacturing industry here in the United States, grow the job market, improve quality of jobs, and again, make ourselves a little bit more self-sufficient in times of crisis. And of course, Part 200, the uniform guidance, which we're going to be speaking about between now and the conclusion of today's program. See a little bit of the timeline. We began this process actually even earlier than the winter of 23, when OMB brought together interagency work groups to look and talk about different proposed changes. We'd had comments published. The hope had been that in December, by December 31st of 23, we'd have all the comments reviewed, adjudicated, and then we would be able to go forward in January with an early springtime to make the uniform guidance go into effect. The comments, we had close to 1,000 of those, and it really wasn't something that could be done that quickly. So things, instead of the uniform guidance going into effect in the spring, the final regs weren't published till the spring. Then they went into effect for October 1st of 2024. Now, on the state administered programs, the department, because again, you've got school years, most of us who are parents, our children are already in school, or maybe if not a week ago or 2 weeks ago, this week. Chesapeake, Virginia, for instance, I know they started school the day after Labor Day. If those state agencies could have gotten all of their protocols and procedures in alignment with the revised 2 CFR, we would have allowed them to start on July 1, or any time between July 1 and October 1. Most states did not do that as they needed the time, but we did want to give that flexibility. But everybody's got to be ready to go, including us at the department, come October 1. As we see here, and let's look at the chat real quick. I don't think let's see, one new message. Hopefully that answered the question there. I see Donna's helping fielding those in there. Thank you, Donna. As we go, you can see the table of contents. And we'll highlight the key changes here as we go, but the acronyms and definitions, we've replaced some of the older acronyms like CFDA, the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance. That's no longer in vogue as a term. We use the term assistance listings now. The general provisions, which more than anything, those are just great examples of the plain language revisions and taking text. There used to be a chart that, again, you'd think a chart would be easier to read, but it was actually more cumbersome than a narrative. And the narrative, I think, is much clearer and easier to read as a grant person than the chart was in terms of following who applies to what and how. Then, of course, the pre-award requirements. Our focus will be mostly today on the post-award, the cost principles, and the audit requirements. For those of you who are looking to apply for additional funding, federal funding, Appendix 1 has the full text of the Notice of Funding Opportunities, or NOFOs. That's the federal-wide definition. Here at the department, we refer to those as NIAs, Notice Inviting Application. Not a big change for us, but the language in that appendix has been greatly streamlined, much shorter, more concise and succinct than in the past. We feel pretty confident, the department, that there's not a major shift in how our NIAs will be outlined and disseminated, but we'll certainly always work to make sure that they are as clear as possible and give you that key information to making your application decisions as quickly as we can so that you know where to invest your time and resources. A few of the things that we'd highlight here, again, we mentioned, we've taken out some of the definitions that really are of little value today. A couple of places that will highlight these. We've seen some changes based on the threshold increases. The equipment has increased their definition, as I'd said, from 5 to 10,000. Anything less than 10,000 is a supply. The modified total direct cost, the MTDC, for subawards threshold, this is a big one. It's increased from $25,000 to $50,000. So that's a great thing for those subawards in terms of the level of indirect costs that can be charged, and it reflects the increased size of the awards and the general cost of living that we've seen over the last few years. When we first, let's go back 21 years, 2003, I won't say first, but 21 years ago, the single audit threshold was $300,000. As of October 1, that audit threshold now will be $1 million. We saw it go from 3 to 5 to 750, and now we're at $1 million. In 4 or 5 years, well, we'll see what that audit threshold looks like then. Probably will hold pat for a little while, but you never know. You never know. The period of performance as a definition, again, not a major issue for us, but when you've got, again, 26 grant making agencies, we've clarified that definition for what that constitutes in terms of the life of the grant, and the requirements for an early termination have been addressed. Now, here at the department, that also is not of major concern. It was one of the high points that OMB put out. For an early termination to occur, there's got to be a level of due process, and based on the grantee's inability or unwillingness to carry out the grants. And there'll be measures that we would take before an early termination would be an appropriate course of action. With regards to the general provisions, I mentioned a couple of places already. Again, how the word "or" will make sure doesn't mean one or the other. It means generally it'll apply to both in many circumstances in terms of the requirements that are being imposed. The language has been improved in sections to better address and reflect that as we go. And we've also looked to try to align where it makes sense. And we see 113, the mandatory disclosures are in alignment with the federal acquisition regs. So again, there are procurement activities that take place with a grant. The federal acquisition regulations, that is the body of regs that the federal agency uses when we're looking to procure goods or services ourselves from an organization to carry out activities here with our agency. We've put it more in alignment with those pieces so that they're more consistent with one another. Now, we'll turn our attention to subpart C in the pre-award requirements. And as we do that, let's see if we've got any questions. These changes go across all granting agencies, correct? Yes, it's across the board here at the Department of Education, across all 26 grant-making agencies. And so thank you for answering that question. Make sure, do we have any others? I'll scan up. Now, feel free to put your questions in the chat. It looks like we're doing a bang-up job of responding in real time as we go. There's about 44 of us on the phone. So as we get closer to the end of this, we could open up the phones and hear from people as well. But for right now, let's put those questions in the chat so we can capture them. Subpart C, these are the pre-award requirements. I think the bigger things here that we'd want to make sure, and we're already doing this with the NIA, but OMB is asking us here with the important citation 200-202 that all federal agencies should really look to effectively engage with the target population, with those eligible entities that could apply for funding at this stage. Now, when we created this particular regulation in the Uniform Guidance 200-202 program design, it's a critical piece at the beginning before we put money out on the street, before we hold a competition. We at least a new competition, because some of our programs have been around for a while. We want to ask this question: what does success look like? What does victory look like for our grantees? How can we go back to Congress? How can we speak to the American people and say our grant projects have been carried out the way they're supposed to, and they have met this national need? They've addressed the statute, the purpose of the statute. So we're looking to do that always, and we're figuring out before we ask you about the performance measures, before we're asking you to submit your applications, before we're even finalizing our selection criteria, we're asking this question: what does success look like? The updates to 202 and requires it encourages, I guess I should say that more appropriately, that proper engagement. Now, the department will initiate, when there are substantive changes for a competition, a proposed rulemaking, and have that open to public comment. Now, it is, and I think the competitive grants process is an inherently small d democratic one. Nothing's perfect, and there's an art and a science to writing these applications, but the process that we put in place to bring in subject matter experts, that we are very transparent in the selection criteria, that we're, and again, it would be one thing if we had the dollars and the opportunity. It'd be great to go and see the locations where you propose to do the work and talk to everybody face to face ahead of time. That's just not feasible based on the time or the dollars that it would cost. But what we've created is an opportunity for you, now the grantee, but you were in the role of applicants, to put together the most informative, persuasive applications, these plans, as possible, to compete against one another, challenging each other, and I think kind of bringing out the best in one another at the same time, to help us make the decision on where to put those dollars. So the program design is intended to, again, engage us in those things. So I mentioned this to say this: when there are opportunities for public comment, I encourage you to take advantage of that, because by law, every comment that you would submit has to be reviewed. And while we will not handwrite a letter to each and every one of you, if all 44 people on this call submitted a comment, we will address them through that Federal Register in general terms. And I will say this, and again, I've been here since October 4th of 1994, so getting closer to 30 years here. I have seen firsthand where, when an applicant, usually it won't just be one, but it could be just one if their idea is good enough. But if enough people have enough of a good idea, and they put that idea forward to the Department of Ed or other grant making agencies, we'll look at that and say, you know what? The public has spoken and they're right. This would be a better course of action. I've seen competitions, I've seen plans and performance measures revised, tweaked because of the good ideas of those who are actually carrying out the grants themselves. So this is a really important piece. So I would encourage you, take advantage of those public comment periods within OIE and ED, or any grant programs or any federal effort that you deem of interest. It's your right as citizens to do that on your own time, not with grant dollar time, but on your own time to do that. A couple of other things we'd want to highlight. We feel very confident with our process. for engaging communities, but every program office is tasked with kind of rethinking this a little bit. Every time we're going to have a competition, how can we do it better? The NIAs, we feel very comfortable with that, but we're also making revisions based on that Appendix 1. And we always are striving to make sure that our subject matter experts that we bring in have not only are they free of any conflict of interest or any bias for or against a particular entity, but they're also having an open mind based on the pedagogy that's being proposed and how that project will be carried out or evaluated. And we're also looking to bring folks with different perspectives, different levels of background. Good reviewers are like gold. We want to keep onto them, keep hold of them, but we also want to keep growing that pool of quality reviewers. So I'm happy to say that as when the uniform guidance was rolled out, many of the things that federal-wide agencies are being required to do, Ed was already moving in that direction. We can always do a better job, but in the case of these pieces that we're talking about here in 202, in 204, and 205, we're doing a really good job of that. Can always do better, always do more, but we are really in a good spot with that. So that's an exciting piece. There are additional whistleblower protections listed in 217, and they've had some revisions with the telecommunications ban in the final guidance here to better align with the statute to make sure that certain communications resources, materials are not from prohibited sources, from either contracting with the enemy, adversary nations, or in particular, certain companies in the People's Republic of China have been identified that we cannot do business with either with the federal programs. So you want to be aware of those. Now, we also want to keep in mind this key section here. Not a lot of major changes, some plain language changes here, but I think it's always important for grantees to know this. Before we put any money out on the street, so this is a new grant, when you're submitting your applications and are successful, our non-competing continuations or NCCs or supplements, we're going to be evaluating your projects for risk. As I said, we are monitoring your grants on a regular basis, formally and informally, with every interaction that we have with you. Before we put money out on the streets, we do a formal evaluation that is in compliance with 200-206. Risks evolve and change over time. The diagram on the slide notes a circular process. It's always taking place. We can, as we're monitoring your grant projects, if we identify a change in risk, reduction in risk, that's a good thing. So if things are less risky, that might be reflected in the award terms and conditions. If during the life of the grant, if we're in the middle of a budget period and we see some concerns, change in personnel that wasn't approved, but you made us the grantee made a switch in project directors and didn't get prior approval. That's a no-no. That might elevate the concern. If there was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication in funds, or an audit concern that was identified, it might mean that we will take action during that budget period to better safeguard the dollars. And that could mean additional reporting. It could mean more technical assistance that we would be providing. It could run the gambit of different things, but all of it is done to better improve the grantee performance. It's not a punitive measure. This isn't a, little kid was acting up in school, go stand in the corner for 15 minutes and, you learn a lesson. If we are going to, based on a risk issue, if we make the determination that additional reporting is required, it's because we need more detail about your project or to make sure that you're going to meet your performance indicators so that we can justify continuing making a non-competing continuation award, that we can continue carrying out the project. If there is conditions that are imposed that would better show that you're in compliance with using the funds or improving your record keeping or what have you, then we're going to have those. We're going to put in place the whatever resources, whatever conditions that we would deem appropriate in this to see if we can improve that compliance. We're not just going to throw the kitchen sink at a problem and have you submitting reports just out of spite or just adding burden to you because we can. That's not in anyone's best interest. All of it's done to help get you back on track in meeting your goals and objectives. And when you do that, those conditions will get removed. So it's not done on a punitive basis. This is a shared responsibility too. So if you submit a report, we got to read it. If we put a grantee on route payment, 2 CFR 200-208 has a menu of compliance related conditions that could be used. If we put you on a route payment or a cost reimbursement, the program staff would then be responsible for reviewing the records to say, yes, this was an allowable expense. You can draw down this amount of money from G5. That's time consuming and burdensome. We'll do that if we need to safeguard dollars, but we want you to demonstrate your financial responsibility, your financial accountability, to the extent that we wouldn't need to have you on those kind of conditions. So the goal will be to get you where you can carry out those activities on your own, if at all possible. Now, some issues, and we don't just throw these on a grantee willy-nilly. You're going to have documented reasons from this through the audits, through your grantee history, through examples of our correspondence. When we impose conditions that require us to update the GANs, we're going to be working in conjunction with our program attorney. So the program officer assigned to your grant, his or her supervisor, and the program attorney will all agree that this is in the best interest of the taxpayer. So know that as we're talking about this. In some conditions, in some examples, we could utilize that high risk designation either for the project or the grant entity itself. When we see systemic issues that are a real challenge for the organization, and we still want them to receive funding because it's in the taxpayer's best interest that the funds get there to the grantee, but it's also in the best interest that we're safeguarding those and making sure that we can document their accountability, double checking. We'll utilize that high risk designation. And again, that's not done arbitrarily or in a way for anything other than when we have to do it. So keep that in mind. There can be the options. It's, kind of more the nuclear option is to not make the award to protect taxpayers or for an early termination. But if you're doing your jobs right and you're making a good faith effort, you're going to know what needs to be done well before we're in that situation. So as long as everyone is working together and no one is intentionally trying to aim to misbehave, as it were, you don't need to worry about these kind of issues. Let's go to the chat here real quick. Any questions? I see a great thank you from that. We're recording. All right, it'll be uploaded. Good deal. All right, we'll go on in the conversation here. I'd mentioned 208. 200-208 provides a listing of specific conditions. We could also be crafting program or project specific conditions more on the programmatic side to help you better meet your goals and objectives. We'll do so in those cases, again, with our program attorney, and we'll include those in revised GANs, grant award notifications. And sometimes, the mitigation strategies that we impose could just be additional technical assistance, smaller, meetings with your program officer. We've got trainings at ed.gov that we may require grantees to take, and we would include that in the GAN as well. So some of them would, depending on the issue and the need, some of them will have more burden than others. And again, risks evolve and change over time. Here we are in 2024. I guarantee you that nobody in 2018 or 2019 outside of the Department of Defense and the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, had a worldwide pandemic as a potential issue for a grant project being successful. Yet there we were in March of 20 and through the better part of 2021 in this slow moving horror movie of the apocalypse. And we were, many projects basically had to shelter in place and reconsider how services were going to go forward and how we could safeguard. We weren't sure what to do in terms of safeguarding the well-being of students, but also teachers and all of those folks that are working in the schools and at the university level. And folks, we're just trying to figure out how to live in a scary, weird moment. So risks evolve and change over time. And as part of our efforts, I really want us to be diligent here in identifying risk issues that impact us. Now, in the chat, and I don't want to lose our questions too much, but let me ask you, what brought, let's see, can we get clarity what brought on these changes? There seems to be a lack of context. And yeah, every few years, and we do that. It's actually, an OMB is required in regulation to update the uniform guidance every 4 or 5 years, so that it is timely and we the best laid plans. We do our best to put something out there, but even then, we've got 26 agencies that are trying to communicate with grantees, and there's misunderstandings, and we realize, hey, things could be clear, things could be better. So that's one of the reasons why we do that. I'd love for people to put in the chat some listing of any of their risk concerns or issues as you go forward. You can put those in there. What are some of the risk issues that you're most concerned about keeping your projects from being as successful? We'll go back in the chat and look at those in a moment. As we're looking at the post-award requirements in subpart D, a big piece here would be the internal controls, having those cybersecurity measures I mentioned earlier. 200-303 outlines that. There is greater flexibility for the disposition of equipment as we go forward in terms of how the grantees will be able to use those in 200-313. And a really positive move. Indian tribes are going to be, for the purposes of the procurement standards, treated the same as states. So as 200-317 says that states may follow their own procurement policies, and now the same, I think, appropriately will apply to Indian tribes as well. A couple of other things concerning with the procurements. The geographic preference has been reduced with this. So again, there's greater focus nationally about the activities, but BABA is a big push there in terms of making sure that we're getting domestically produced iron and steel and the infrastructure for broadband and the like. But we've removed the geographic preference. There is an added reference here for our grantees who they have an established written policies for how they'll handle procurement, that they've got a mechanism rewarding bidders committing to specific numbers and types of U.S. jobs. Again, with the infrastructure legislation that was passed, a hallmark of the Biden administration, seen in BABA among other pieces, in making sure that that again, as we're looking for reporting and we're asking grantees to document the records, we're not, we're formally saying that only the things we're only going to be asking are the things we absolutely have to have to measure the effectiveness of your project and to ensure you are in compliance. Highlighted as well that the pass-through entities, so for ED's purposes, the state education agencies mostly are responsible for making that subrecipient and contractor determinations. 331 outlines that those distinctions, I think, very effectively. Many times you'll have organizations that they're going to make a contract, but in fact it's a subaward, or vice versa. They're calling it a subaward, and for all intents and purposes, it's a contract. Certainly encourage you to read over the language in more detail, but a subaward the entity is going to have more day-to-day decision-making control, carrying out a component of a project, while a contract is going to be a vehicle for procuring goods or services. So, and there can be a fine line here, but the pass-through entities will be making that determination based on the language, the requirements there that compare and contrast subawards from the contractors. Fixed subaward amounts, we don't see a lot of those here at the Department of Ed, but that's doubled in price. It went from $250,000 to $500,000. And as I'd said before, there's greater clarity for termination across the board. For our purposes here, let's see what was put in the chat. Let's see, can procurement still be a priority with our grant funds to prioritize tribal communities and NIA contractors? That one, Stacy, that's a great question. That goes more to some of the statutory requirements that with the program. So I would refer more, that would be more about what's in the program statute. But certainly if that's a key part of your grant, the key, from our vantage point here is, again, tribal entities absolutely need to, they can follow their own policies, written established procedures, and everyone else, you want to make sure that those written established procedures fully comply with the uniform guidance. Everybody though, tribes, states, everybody, you want to make sure that it is a conflict-free, free of bias process that maximizes the federal dollars. Now, let's turn our attention to keeping good records here. And again, keep those questions or thoughts coming. We want to make sure that we have a dialogue here as we go. But the records of your projects, whether they are electronic or paper or a combination, whatever they are, they should serve as a monetary roadmap through the successful completion of your grants. That is unchanged. And those records should do exactly what a roadmap would do if you got out a hard copy map, or you were using your phone and did Google Maps or something, and were kind of using that to get to your destination. And so let's think about what a good roadmap would do. We'd want it to be clear, concise, and detailed. We'd want it to be free of any extraneous information, but get us from the starting point, and think about that, the first day in the first year of our grant, to, our current position, wherever we are, whatever day in whatever year, whatever budget period we're in right now. And the finish line is that last day in the last year of the project, where hopefully on that last day, we're exactly where we said we would be in terms of meeting our goals and objectives, and have been able to account for all of our funds being used allowably, allocably, and reasonably, that we'll talk about here. Consistent with your own institutional policies and meeting those federal requirements. They are aligned with the GEPRA, or Government Performance and Results Act, or your program-specific measures, whichever one is more appropriate. Any changes that would be made would be done so in scope of the approved applications. And of course, it gets us to our finish line, achieves the project goals. So let's make this a little interactive. In the chat, thinking about your budgets, where is most of your budgets? What line item category does most of your dollars, your grant dollars, go towards? What line item category is that? Let's put that in the chat here. I'm going to go to the next slide. I see training. Okay, that's one. Contractual or personnel. Okay, and even the contractual, it's going to be a lot of personnel, I'm guessing. Salary and fringe. Okay. Training. Okay, so it sees training, contractual. There might be a little bit of overlap with some of those. Every dollar, you should have a plan for every dollar, right? And I would contend, if you don't have a plan, you don't need that dollar. For your records, you need to make sure that you are in position to to account for the dollars, but the larger the dollar amount for a category, and we got to account for everything. The larger the dollar amount, the greater the level of detail. Your record should answer questions in the minds of your auditors. It should answer questions in the minds of the program staff monitoring your grants, as well as your staff and potentially your successors. If you don't know the person or individuals in your accounting or business office that draw down funds, a homework assignment is to meet them before the end of this week, unless they're on vacation. If they're on vacation, make sure you connect with them as soon as they're back, so that you have a positive working relationship. And as the project director, we're going to come to you and talk to you about the drawdowns and if they're excessive or infrequent, and you need to be aware of what's going on with your projects. You also want to be able to answer these three questions. Are the activities and expenditures in my project, are they allowable? Are they allocable? And are they reasonable? Now, subpart E of the cost principles goes into great detail about these three concepts. But again, big picture, allowable is either permitted or not specifically prohibited by regs. Allocable, it's truly necessary or assignable to the project's success. And that reasonable would be those costs incurred by the prudent person in comparable circumstances. Now, prudent person is a subjective term, but you need to be able to think about the best way to stretch your dollars and make sure clearly that the needs of where the needs of the project begins and ends, and where the needs of the institution begins and ends, so that you can clearly make sure that you are funding the grant projects. There are a few prior approval requirements that have been changed here in the subpart E on the cost principles. And I'll say this, day to day, you're going to look more at subpart E than any other section. Some of those prior approval requirements, now they've just made it very clear that things are unallowable, such as entertainment costs, unless there is something in statute that would permit that. That's an example. The de minimis rate for our indirect costs, now that has gone up from 10% to 15%. In late September, we're going to have a computer-based training that will address these changes. I'd want you to refer, though, to the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement that your organization has. And Donna, if you could help me out, does it have a training cap on the indirect cost, or is it just whatever the rate is that's in place?
Well, we have a little bit of every program. So we have
Okay.
8 active programs that could be represented here. And I know, for
Okay.
example, our Native American language has a 5% cap and some of the others. So yeah, they're represented across the board.
Okay. So if the program that you have, you might have an indirect cost rate. And for those of you who are experienced in this, you know the drill. You might have a negotiated rate much higher than 5%. It's going to be 5 in your case, just this example, it's 5% or the actual, whichever is the lesser. So in this case, the de minimis rate wouldn't apply to you. The de minimis rate is great for those eligible entities that don't have a negotiated rate in place. It might be to their benefit. We have training rates. We have caps on rates. The de minimis rate does not apply to our local education agencies, our school districts, or our state education agencies as a whole. So, but we did want to make you aware that the de minimis rate has increased. Our universities, it would apply to them if they wanted, but universities have rates that are so much significantly higher on average than 15%. It's not in their best interest to use the de minimis. The subaward threshold for calculating indirect costs has gone up from 25 to 50,000. We've put citations here in the materials to be aware of. We've had some updates here on the fringe benefits for unused leave, underfunded pension costs, and so in those things generally in the indirect costs pool 204.31. Certain allowability of data and evaluation costs. Now those have been clarified to be allowable, even though some of those pieces would take place after the project, 204.55, and the allowable admin costs associated with closed and adjusted closeout requirements. Those also have been clarified in 470 and 472. So if staff needs to carry things out. Want to make you aware of common grantee issues with carryover funds. Money will be carried over from one budget period to the next automatically without prior approval. However, carryover funds, they could be offset by a reduction in the next budget period allotment based on the size of the carryover and the rationale for why that carryover is occurring. Have a plan for every dollar. And if you don't have a plan for those dollars could be reduced. I think they will be reduced if you don't have a plan. So be proactive in thinking about how you're going to use funds. Project directors, be aware of the typical drawdowns for your project, coordinate with your business office so that if there are legitimate reasons why funds could be carried over. And if you've got a plan to use them, man, we want you to have it. But we are looking as an agency very closely at carryover for our non-competing continuations. And if there's not sufficient justification, we are looking to reduce those funds, better support other projects that could use funds as they go forward.
David, there's 2 questions in the chat. Sorry.
Yeah, let's get to them. Let's see, what do we got here?
Can you define the administrative cost per 200.472?
The administrative costs I hate to pass the buck, but I'll have to look at it. I don't have that definition off on the top of my head, and I'm sharing my screen. So we'll need to get back with you on what that formal definition is currently, and we'll do a compare contrast, Stacy. So we'll need to follow up after the program. Thank you for that, and my apologies for not being able to better address it offhand. Is this secretarial or admin cost? That's typically the secretarial would kind of fall under that'd be a personnel cost potentially. It could be part of, depending on the nature of that person's work and how that person or persons is supporting the grant, it might be something that's covered in indirect cost versus direct cost. And that's going to be seen based on the kind of the way the grant project is. Thanks. It helps for writing future grants. Okay. And we'll make sure to follow up with you on that. Oh, we got some more stuff here that popped up. Oh, we've got 413. There we go. Looks like that. Many of those things would typically be an indirect cost. Thank you, Tanya, for adding that into the conversation. Moving funds around from one budget category to another. You want to make sure that you're working with your program officer on that end to make sure that that's following what they would ask, and establishing strong internal controls and implementing audit recommendations. So we'll talk about a few things here. 200.308, that section in the uniform guidance addresses carryover and many of the budgetary changes that occurred during the life of a grant. We'd invite you to see that, put in writing your plan for how to use those funds. Let the program office know as early as you can if, in fact, carryover would be an appropriate, something that you're looking to do would be necessary. With the internal controls, I mentioned this already in terms of making sure that you're aware of and really heeding your own cybersecurity protocols. The internal controls section here in 200.303 was updated to require our grantees to include cybersecurity measures as part of their established written internal control procedures. I can't emphasize enough to you to follow those internal controls. And the cybersecurity is a paramount issue. Cybersecurity is the #1 issue here at the Department of Education. for safeguarding the integrity of our systems and the integrity of our data. When you think about the private information we have, say at federal student aid with those folks that have student loans and the like, the data and records information that you provide as grantees and staff on projects, all of that is critical to safeguard, and we take that very seriously. So we want you to do so as well. It's important to note that internal controls are not 100% guarantee that you're going to be risk-free. It provides that reasonable assurance that the objectives of your entity will be achieved. Reasonable assurance. There's no such thing as risk-free. The only time that we would have zero risk when in relation to grants is if we did not make the awards. In that case, we'd have 100% guaranteed chance of not meeting the needs in the community. So we've got to find an acceptable risk tolerance here. Having strong internal controls, and the internal controls, just as risks evolve, they're going to need to evolve and change over time. They need to be tested and monitored. And everyone at the organization has got to take it seriously. From the highest ranking person at your organization to the summer intern who's there, or a volunteer family, a parent or something that's a part of your projects. Everybody has to make sure that they are embracing those internal controls and safeguarding taxpayer funds and your data as you go. We've included a link to the GAO's Green Book. This is for the Government Accountability Office to speak to federal agencies, but it's a great tool for your organizations to consider how to assess risk and strengthen your internal controls yourselves. You can see here on this screen the internal control components, from the control environment, risk assessment, the control activities where we're testing, engaging, the information and communication, and the monitoring. But I'll say all of these things, even when you've got computer systems that help protect us from ourselves, it is all about people who are dedicated and committed to doing the job right to begin with. That's the big piece there with subpart E and D. Now, in subpart F, we've got the audit requirements. And the big change here mentioned earlier, we want to make you aware, this is an entity, not a grant project responsibility, but the entity threshold has gone from $750,000 to $1 million. It's annually in terms of expended funds. So typically a single audit would be submitted. GAN Attachment 3 outlines the requirements for this procedure. You want to be mindful of that. There has been some flexibility in terms of potential extensions for audits to be submitted. And the other piece, besides the dollar amount that we've seen that's a big deal, is this another comprehensive basis of accounting versus the generally accepted accounting principles. You can use those. So you could do a non-GAAP audit. However, they are less complex. They do cost less to prepare, but being less complex, you might not yield the same levels of information. So this is a new piece here. But we did want to make you aware of it. It is an institutional, not a grant project responsibility. In a given year, your project and your staff, your records might not be looked at by an auditor. Doesn't mean they won't be, but in a given year, it's not expected that you'll be regularly audited unless your particular project has the most or one of the top 3 or 4 highest programs in terms of federal funding expenditures. So keep that in mind. Here we've got a listing of the common audit findings. And let's think about that. Again, thinking about right now where you thought the larger amounts or the largest amount of your grant dollars go. We look at activities allowed or unallowed. That's a concern about unallowable activities. Allowable costs and the cost principles, cash management. Those pieces, levels of effort, they're to the right side of the columns. So let's think about that. Good record keeping, making sure that you're able to document who's working on the project. If your records don't show that the staff is carrying out the grants. If most of your money is in contractual, or let's say, we'll just keep it easy, salary and fringe. If we don't have the records that reflect that the people who are supposed to be at this, making this amount of money, and it's, and that based on that percentage of time from the grant, are working on the grant, and a large chunk of that paper trail is missing, then what that's saying is you're unable to document that whatever percentage that we mentioned was going towards those categories is going to be accounted for. Now, maybe there's some program activity records that could support it, but you want to have good, clear records that answer questions in the minds of the reviewers, auditors, and not raise them. So following your internal controls, keeping good records, making sure that there's the proper sign-offs on the expenditures, that there's a segregation of duties, that you as the project director are signing off and someone else above you in the business or accounting office signing off, and that those folks, we don't have the same person doing that. When we think about small organizations, if we've got somebody that's, if Downey is signing off and approving this, that another Downey is signing off at the same time, that's not necessarily really helpful. So you want that segregation of duties. Let's see. We've got some examples under the Native American Language Program admin cap. Yeah, and there's a good example there. You want to follow your program statutes in terms of what is the acceptable admin caps and what goes into those. Excellent. Make sure if there's any cost share match that is being documented as well. Now with that said, what are the things that are our chief concerns from a monitoring standpoint as we're going forward? What are we looking for? Well, our concerns would be if we can't show that your goals and objectives are being met, whatever those are, whether GEPRA indicators or any program specific performance measures. If we're seeing excessive or infrequent draws, the rate of your drawdown should be aligned with the scope of the grants. Excessive drawdowns and by that excessive would be if you draw down funds and it's just sitting in an account and it's accruing interest. Well, that money, if it's not being drawn down and spent out for allowable purposes, if it's just sitting there, unless statute would say otherwise, that money will have to be returned, as well as any interest earned. Now, today that interest earned is actually kind of moving up. It's different than a few years ago when a checking account might only make a penny a month. So you'd want to be mindful of that. At the same time, infrequent draws are an equal concern, because at that point where it begs the question, is the work getting done? So again, ideally the drawdown should be aligned with the rate of the work. But if a significant amount of money is left that is still sitting in the account as we're nearing the end with 3 months to go, and if say 70% of the funds are still in G5, we're going to have to address that. And you as the project director should be able to say, oh no, it's really not 70%, it's more like 10. We're going to be drawing down here shortly, because otherwise we wouldn't necessarily be able to make an NCC at a full dollar amount. So if there's just delays and lags in this time, we want to be mindful of it. And of course, poor record keeping and fiscal accountability, that's another concern. What are our indicators of success? Let's think about this in a positive way. When we see that your goals and objectives are being met, that we can determine through your interim and your annual performance reports, I should say, that you are on target and you're using taxpayer dollars wisely in terms of the goals and objectives. If we're seeing that those performance indicators are met, if there's a demonstrated good record keeping and fiscal accountability, and being timely and responsive in submitting reports, submitting your audits, and getting back to us if we have questions about you. Mentioned this earlier. It could be a measure for actions to help in corrective action. But I'd invite you and your teams, to visit the Department of Education's website, ed.gov. You can put in the search box grantee training, and it will take you to a page, a host of online courses They're 508 compliant. They're in English and Spanish on a host of grant administration topics. Now, in the next few days, if you go there this week or next week, you're going to be seeing a sign that says, disclaimer, these are being updated to reflect the new 2 CFR. And we're listing out on that main page the big changes that we've talked about between 2 and 3:30 here local time, Eastern time. So we're updating these classes. The principles and concepts in these trainings are still valid, even though we've changed, as we've talked about. We've seen the dollar threshold increases and some definitions change. But the core concepts are still useful and meaningful for the grantee community, for our grant applicants to understand what's being done. And we'd invite you to take those classes as we go. A few winning reminders as we look to make sure about any questions. Oh, Donna, already big thumbs up to you for putting that in there. I can never remember the links. So I tell you, our search boxes work pretty well. So you've got the training page. You can also go to our uniform. If you put uniform guidance, the first link, then after the search box will take you to our page. On the resources, we've got a briefing that's very similar to what we've done here, as well as a wonderful set of FAQs that we've put together along with our Office of General Counsel that can help answer your questions about the uniform guidance as you go forward. In conclusion here, make sure that you're reading the full GAN, understand the fine print and the expectations. If you have a question about G5 and the system, you want to contact the G5 help desk. For day-to-day programmatic activities, you absolutely want to contact your program officer who's identified in box 3 of the GAN. Let's see if we've got any other questions or anything. Donna does rock. I'm definitely going to heart that as well. Bravo to you, Donna, for all the great work you do. I'm glad to see that the grantees feel the way about you that we do. That's awesome.
It's a team effort, that's for sure. Thanks.
It is. And I just keep those lines of communication open, folks. Very honestly, it's not an issue of opening Pandora's box. Here's the truth. If there's a problem going on at your organization, that box is going to open itself up. And the longer we wait to open it up, the bigger a mess it's going to be. The bigger a problem, the more money that might need to be returned, the more interest that might need to be returned, the greater an impact it would have on your risk profiles and your ability to successfully compete for competitive grants going forward, or at the very least, an increase in the kind of risk, specific conditions to mitigate risk that would be imposed. And I'll tell you this really in closing. One of the first times I had a chance to give a training similar to what we've done here, it was in person, pre-COVID, a long time ago, a lifetime ago. But at the end of a similar presentation, I actually had a project director come up to me and say, when I came to this event, I was told by my boss not to talk to those people from Washington. True story. I could wave, I could smile, but we don't want to talk to them too much because we're afraid that it might cause a problem. And that's when, and I was blown away by how candid this person was. And then the following statement said, but you know what? I'm not going to do that. After listening to this presentation and seeing kind of what's expected, I'm going to make sure that I have an open line of communication to my project officer, my ed contact. And I love that this person said that. I was disappointed that anyone might have said that to them very directly or said it in an unofficial way, like, to be mindful, even in a joking way, if it come across that they took it that seriously. So I say, keep those lines of communication open. It is our jobs to help you succeed. It's our jobs to keep you from maybe hurting yourself or the reputational risk of your organizations or misusing funds. We're in this together to work with you every step of the way. And with the comment that Donna rocks, and I agree, I know you're in good hands with the program staff here with these fine people in OIE. So I'll turn things back over to Donna. If we need to go, I understand. but we'll work to get you the slides and we'll work to get you questions. But Donna, back to you.
Great. Thank you so, so much, David, and for giving us your time. It's been I always learn something new, and my team and I are in the background discussing some of these as well, going, oh yeah, let's look at this. So you don't know all the things and how well you're reaching us, David. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Love what
And
you
we
all do and the important work you do. It means a lot.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we are a great team. And I couldn't ask for better colleagues and support. And I think that we are at time and we will get the slides to you. Alani, did you have any other announcements before we stop?
No, that's about it. And thank you, David. This was great. And we will send out an email to all of our OIE grantees with the recording and the slides. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.